What do I practice if I only have a little time to practice? This is a question I get asked all the time, and look, I totally get it. I'm a dad, I have responsibilities, I have a job. Long gone are those days where I could put 5 hours into my instrument. However, even if you can only find half an hour here and there to play your guitar, there are ways to maximize that precious time and see real results, and that's what we're looking at today. We're going to look at some different options for different guitarists with different needs. The first option, I'll call it the mixed bag. This is for the intermediate guitarist who is looking to progress in kind of all aspects of their playing without necessarily having specific goals. For this guy, I'd recommend breaking down the practice schedule into 3 parts covering 3 of the bigger musical topics: groove/rhythm, vocabulary, and improvisation. So if he's got 30 minutes to practice, each one of these sections gets 10 minutes. Let's start out with the groove and rhythm stuff, and for this, it's pretty simple. You take a rhythm part you like. For example, this funky little guitar bit here. And all you're gonna do is play that along with the metronome. I'm gonna set my metronome on the 2nd and 4th beat because that feels pretty good to me, but you can also play it with every beat. Anyway, here's how it sounds. I can honestly zen out and just play something like that for 10 minutes straight along with the metronome, but if you get bored, you can switch it up and try a couple things. And this was something that I just made up, but you can use any sort of rhythm thing. The point is to keep it fairly simple so that you don't really have to think about what your fingers are doing, but rather you can focus right on the metronome and make sure that your timing is bang on. And the benefit here is twofold. First of all, it's strengthening your internal clock. Your sense of time becomes sharper, making it easier for other musicians to play with you and for you to play with them. Developing a strong sense of rhythm is one of the most important things that you can do for your music. The other benefit is by focusing on an external sound source like this, it gets you out of your own head so that when you do go and play with other musicians, you are used to not just listening to yourself and you don't get into what I call tunnel ear. And look at that, the first 10 minutes is up. Now it's time to go work on vocabulary, which is when you grow your musical knowledge by learning something from someone else. Take a solo, a riff, a lick, a chord progression, whatever, something you like, and figure out how to play it. You only have 10 minutes here, so you're probably going to need to keep it fairly short, but here would be a blues lick that I could probably figure out within 10 minutes. Use your ear as much as possible because, hey, now we have the added benefit of working on that. Listen to it over and over again. Try singing along with it before you even pick up your instrument. And then once you think you've got it all figured out, if you need to, then you can go and check out the tab. And now with the last 10 minutes of the practice session, we're going to take whatever it was that we just learned and incorporate it in a musical setting, improvising and jamming with it. Here I might put on a backing track, or I might just go back to my trusty metronome. But what I'm going to do is just jam out with it and see what I can create using that lick as my springboard like this. Now this doesn't need to be a solo. Say it's a chord progression with a strumming pattern that you just learned. For this, maybe I will take that strumming pattern and try it out with different chords, or maybe I'll take my chord progression and see if I can improvise more chords onto the tail end of it. The point is that you're taking something, getting creative with it, because the more ways that you look at a musical concept, the easier it is for it to sink into your musical subconscious. Change it up and try to absorb something new every day, whatever it is. Even if it's a little thing, it's going to start adding up over time. Now let's talk about the guy who really does want to focus purely on his solos. Again, 2 big things here are vocabulary and implementing vocabulary, which we already discussed. And if you're focusing on soloing, obviously do soloing stuff for this. However, I'd also recommend spending some time on 2 other things. One of those things is what I would call neck studies. This is when you're working on visualizing, understanding, and mapping out your fretboard so that when it's time to take your solos, you have a system to draw your notes from. And depending on where you're at in your musical journey, this is going to look different. So for the guy who is just getting started on solos, they're probably going to do stuff like run their pentatonics up and down the neck to get them under their fingers. If you're more advanced, maybe you're doing something like taking your mode shapes and figuring out how each one of the major 7 arpeggios relates to it. So for example, if I have a B Locrian, this is where the C major 7 arpeggio is. The layout of the guitar is not super intuitive, and so what I'm trying to do here is look at my fretboard and my shapes and my notes from as many angles as possible. Once I've mastered something, I'll move on to something else in a future practice session. And the last thing I'll do when I'm working on my soloing is just putting on a backing track and soloing along to it. I can either do this without any restrictions, just kind of naturally seeing what comes out, or I might give myself some sort of strange restriction which gets me out of my comfort zone. For example, here's a solo over top of an A minor where I only use the B string. Now, I want to take a second here to discuss results. If you're limited with your practice time, you got to stay relatively focused and resist the urge to take on every single musical concept that gets you excited. It's so much more valuable to get quite good at one thing than try to do a whole bunch of things and see little to no progress. Option number 3 is the guy looking to add one specific new thing into their repertoire. It can be a theoretical concept, new chords, a technical thing, whatever. We're gonna break the session down into 3 time slots. Slot 1 is understanding or studying the concept. So say I'm working on minor 7 chords. What I'm gonna do is look at the theory behind minor 7 chords. Why do they work the way they do? Why do they sound the way they do? Where can I use them? This kind of thing. My next time slot, I'm going to come up with exercises that help me implement the concepts on guitar. So if I'm working on those minor 7 shapes, I could play minor 7s on the A string and then move it around in 4th intervals. That's going to get that shape under my fingers. I'm going to do it with a metronome because any chance you get, use a metronome. With my last time slot, again, I'm going to get creative and find ways to incorporate whatever I just learned in a musical setting. So with those minor 7 chords, what I can do, put on the metronome, jam out, and see if I can figure out some cool fills and riffs around them. The next option is number 4, and this is for the guy who wants to spend time learning songs. It could be for his band to play, for his pleasure, whatever. And for this guy, I'd recommend breaking down the practice session into 5 parts. So if I have 45 minutes, my first 9 minutes would be doing what I call active listening. For this, I'm listening over and over again. It's not background noise, but listening is the one thing I'm doing. I'm focusing as much as possible and trying to pick up as much as I can. I'll try singing along with the melody and the riffs, listen to each individual instrument to get an idea of what they're doing, rewind any tricky parts if I can't quite grasp them, this kind of thing. And once I feel like I have a strong grasp of the song, I'll grab my guitar and start figuring it out. And the more active listening I've done, the easier this is going to be. And the first thing I'll do when I'm figuring out a song on guitar is get an idea of what the bass is doing. If you have a rough idea of what notes the bass is highlighting, you can use some pretty simple music theory to figure out what chords that you have to play. I'll play my chords along with the song, making any tweaks that are necessary, figuring out which inversions I want to use. And by practicing this way, instead of just looking up a tab, I'm actually developing my ear. The more I do this, easier it gets, the more I improve. Once I've got the chords down, I'll work on any melody stuff in my next time slot. So this would be any lead guitar lines, solos, even the vocal part. And since I already understand what the chords are doing, I've got the backdrop. It's going to be so much easier to figure this out than if I was just going and doing this stuff first. And I will note, I find it very valuable to figure out the main vocal part. This is the thing that the whole song is built around, and by understanding what's going on there, it allows me to make more informed musical choices to best support that thing. And then I'll spend my next time slot, which was, 9 minutes, just playing along with the song, trying to get as close as I can with the guitar part that I'm trying to emulate. And then finally, I'm going to try and get creative with my last 9 minutes. I'm still going to be playing over top of the song, but I'll try to do something like use different chord inversions, try to play a solo over top of the whole thing, come up with a harmony line for the melody, that kind of thing. Might take multiple days for me to get through one song, and if that's the case, maybe I will allocate a little bit of time at the beginning of my next practice session to review what I learned today. My last option, number 5, is for the guy looking to improve a purely technical aspect of playing guitar. For example, say I want to play a fast blues bass run like this up to speed. When I first learned that, I couldn't play it that fast, but what I did for my entire practice session was this process. I slowed it down exceptionally slow and analyzed my hand motions carefully. I wanted to make sure that I was playing as efficiently as possible. Wasted effort is the antithesis of playing fast. And when I did this, I noticed that I was angling my pick in a way so that after every third note, my pick was bumping into the next string, which was slowing me down and making an ugly sound. I realized I needed to angle my pick differently. I never would have picked up on this kind of thing if I was playing at full speed. And once I've sorted out my motions and repeated it over and over again at a slow speed, I'm going to try to find the fastest speed that I can play at where I can still maintain that proper form. And once that threshold of difficulty has become easy, I'm going to gradually bump up my metronome one beat at a time until I find my new threshold and then repeat. Play it over and over again until that becomes easy, turn up the speed. And when time is done for the day, I'll write down my metronome markings so that I know where to start off next time I come to practice. It's gradual, it takes some time, but this method is the only way you get faster. And if I'm working on some scales or something like that, or some other exercises or whatever, I'm using the same thing. There you have it, 5 ways you can make the most of a short practice session. I wouldn't think of this as an exact science, but rather as a starting point that you can use to adjust to your needs. Maybe you have time for more than one of these options in a single practice session, or maybe you want to switch between 2 of them every second day. Do what makes sense for you. But I will say, if you commit to these guidelines, you absolutely will see results. Sure, there will be times where you just need to power through and get over certain humps, but usually on the other side of that are deeper musical satisfactions. But keep in mind, every step of the way you should be finding a sense of joy in it. That's what this is all about. And if you're not, you got to change it up or take a break. Thank you all for watching, and an extra big thank you to everyone who supports my channel through Patreon. If you want to check out another video like this one, hit that link up there. If you want to check out that sweet, sweet Sammy G merch, you can find that at shopsamuraiguitarist.com. If you're new here, hit the subscribe button, ring the bell, stay tuned for a wide range of music-related content. And until next time, look after yourselves, look after each other, look after the planet. I'm Samurai Guitarist, and I'll see you again soon.